The sound of shattering crystal pierced the elegant dining room, followed by my mother's shrill laughter. Not the warm kind, the type that slices through conversation like a blade. I watched my father's face drain of color as the remnants of his vintage wine collection dripped down the cream wallpaper. I'm Katherine, and this was the moment I decided my mother had to pay. Really, Michael? Mother's voice dripped with disdain. You can't even afford to maintain your precious wines properly. Those racks were clearly unstable. She dabbed her napkin delicately at non-existent wine spots on her designer blouse. The entire family sat frozen around the mahogany table. Uncle James, Aunt Patricia, Cousin Sophie, and my brother Tom. Even Emily, Mother's ever-present best friend, seemed uncomfortable. The only movement was the steady crimson stream flowing across the hardwood floor. Father's hands trembled slightly as he gripped his fork. Laura, please, not now. Oh, but when? Mother's eyes glittered dangerously. When should we discuss how you've been lying to everyone about our financial situation? Pretending everything's fine while you're practically begging the bank for extensions? I gripped my knife harder, knuckles white. The metal felt cool against my palm. Mother, Tom started, but she cut him off with a wave. Your father, she announced to the table, has been living beyond his means for years. All those business dinners, client meetings, just desperate attempts to maintain appearances. And now we're all paying the price. Father's shoulders slumped. I'd never seen him look so defeated. This man who'd worked 16-hour days, who'd never missed a single one of my dance recitals, despite his crushing schedule, who still brought Mother flowers every Friday, even after she'd stopped acknowledging them. The country club membership, Mother continued, her voice rising, the summer house, the children's trust funds, all smoke and mirrors. Sophie started crying quietly. Tom reached for her hand under the table. Laura, Emily ventured, maybe this isn't the best time. It's the perfect time. Mother stood, swaying slightly. The wine glass in her hand threatened to spill with each gesture. Everyone should know what a fraud Michael Reynolds really is. I watched Father's face carefully. Each word hit him like a physical blow, but he wouldn't defend himself. He never did. Not against her. The thing about revenge is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets and lightning. It creeps in during moments like these, when you're watching someone you love being systematically destroyed by someone who promised to love them. I've protected you for too long, Mother declared, covered for your failures, made excuses to our friends. Well, I'm done. That's when I saw it, the slight curl of satisfaction at the corners of her mouth. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. She'd planned this humiliation, invited the family specifically to witness it. Even the wine rack's collapse seemed suspiciously timed. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound drew everyone's attention, even Mother's. Sit down, Katherine, she snapped. This doesn't concern you, but it did. Every scheme, every manipulation, every calculated cruelty. It had all been building to this moment. I'd spent years watching her orchestrate these little incidents, each one designed to chip away at Father's dignity. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I think it concerns all of us. Mother's eyes narrowed. Don't test me, young lady. Or what? I stepped away from the table. You'll reveal my secrets too? Go ahead. Unlike Father, I don't have anything left to lose. The room fell silent except for the steady drip of wine hitting the floor. Mother and I stared at each other across the ruins of what was supposed to be a family dinner. In her eyes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. She knew. She knew that I'd finally seen through her carefully constructed facade. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother for what she truly was. Not an unstoppable force, but a desperate woman clinging to control. I walked out of the dining room that night, leaving behind the wreckage of crystal, wine, and family ties. But I took something with me, a purpose. Mother had spent years crafting her perfect image, building her web of lies and manipulation. Now it was my turn to start weaving. She'd taught me well, after all. Perhaps too well. 3 days after the dinner disaster, I found Mother holding court at Rosewood Country Club. She'd positioned herself perfectly. Center table, afternoon sun casting a golden halo around her carefully styled hair. Emily sat beside her, both of them surrounded by a cluster of society women who hung on Mother's every word. It's been so difficult, Mother dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Managing everything alone while Michael focuses on his issues. My coffee cup clinked sharply against its saucer. I'd chosen a corner table, hidden behind a large fern, but close enough to hear every perfectly crafted lie. "You're so brave, Laura," one of the women cooed, "and still so generous, hosting the summer benefit despite everything." Emily nodded sympathetically. Laura never lets personal troubles interfere with her charitable work. I nearly laughed. Mother's charitable work mainly involved organizing expensive galas where she could showcase her latest designer purchases and network with potential allies. The actual charities received pittances compared to the event costs. My phone buzzed. "Tom, where are you? Need to talk." "Ladies, if you'll excuse me." Mother stood, smoothing her silk dress. "I have a meeting with the event planner. Emily, would you mind handling the final details?" "Of course, darling." Emily's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Interesting." I waited until Mother left before approaching their table. Emily's face tightened when she saw me. "Katherine, what a surprise." "Emily," I slid into Mother's vacant chair. "Enjoying your role as chief enabler today?" The other women shifted uncomfortably. Emily's laugh was brittle. "I don't know what you mean." "No?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through photos. "So these credit card statements showing Mother's shopping sprees using Father's business account, that's not something you've been helping her hide?" Emily's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "Those are private matters between your parents." "Nothing's private when it's fraud, Emily." I kept my voice low, pleasant. "How long have you been helping her doctor the accounts? I should go." Emily gathered her things quickly. "Ladies, excuse me." I watched her practically run from the dining room. The remaining women stared at me, scandalized and intrigued. "Oh, don't let me interrupt your lunch," I smiled. "I'm sure Mother will have a fascinating explanation for everything when she returns." My phone buzzed again. "Tom, seriously, Kath, it's about Mom." I found Tom in the club's library, pacing between leather armchairs. "What's wrong?" "She's selling the summer house." He ran fingers through his hair. "Without telling Dad." "She can't, it's in both their names." She forged his signature on the papers. Tom collapsed into a chair. "I saw them on her desk this morning when I dropped off Sophie." The summer house, where we'd spent every August of our childhood, where Father taught us to sail, where Tom had proposed to Sophie's mother, where I'd... "Does Father know?" Tom shook his head. "She's telling everyone he agreed to it, that it's part of their financial restructuring." He made air quotes, face twisted with disgust. "When's the sale supposed to close?" "Next week. Some cash buyer she found through Emily's real estate connections." He looked up at me. "We have to stop her, Kath." I sat down slowly, mind racing. "Maybe we don't." "What?" "Maybe instead of stopping her, we let her hang herself." I leaned forward. "Think about it. Forged documents, fraudulent sale, conspiracy with Emily. That's not just unethical, it's criminal." "You want to let her commit fraud?" "I want to catch her committing fraud, with witnesses, evidence, something she can't talk her way out of." Tom's face paled. "That would destroy her." "She's destroying herself, Tom. We'd just be making sure everyone sees it." He stood abruptly. "I can't be part of this. She's still our mother." "Is she?" I watched him pace again. "When was the last time she acted like one?" Before he could answer, the library door opened. Mother stood there, Emily hovering anxiously behind her. "Well," Mother's voice was ice. "What a cozy little family meeting. Discussing anything interesting?" I met her gaze steadily. "Just catching up. You know how it is. So many secrets to keep track of these days." Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty? Fear? But her smile remained fixed, perfect. "Dinner at home tonight," she announced. "Both of you. No excuses." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Katherine, stay away from Emily. She doesn't need your accusations." After she left, Tom grabbed my arm. "What are you going to do?" I watched Mother's retreating figure through the library windows, already rehearsing her next performance for someone new. Whatever it takes. The bank statements spread across my desk like fallen leaves, each one revealing another piece of Mother's elaborate financial maze. Credit card charges for spa weekends, labeled as business meetings. Cash withdrawals that coincided with her shopping sprees, logged as office supplies. And there, buried in the latest statement, a wire transfer to an offshore account. My new office at Morton & Pierce offered the perfect vantage point for my investigation. Through the glass walls, I watched Daniel approach, 2 coffee cups in hand. "You look like you're planning a murder," he said, setting 1 cup beside me. "Just following the money." I pushed a statement toward him. "See anything interesting?" He studied it, frowning. "These transactions, they're all routed through shell companies." His eyes widened. "Wait, isn't this your father's business account?" Before I could answer, my phone lit up with Tom's face. "Hey, what's—" "She's selling my house." His voice cracked. "The one Sarah and I bought for Sophie." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. "What?" "Mom convinced Sarah to sign over her power of attorney last month. Said it was to help with Sophie's college fund." Tom's laugh was hollow. "Now she's liquidating everything, claiming it's to protect us from Dad's financial irresponsibility." Daniel watched me grip the phone tighter. "I'll call you back," I managed. "There's more," Tom said quickly. "Emily came to see me. She's scared, Kath. Says Mum's been having her falsified documents for years. Bank records, property deeds." "Where are you?" "Home. Sophie's at school." "Stay there." I stood, gathering the statements. "And Tom, don't tell Mother you talked to me." Daniel followed me to the elevator. "You're not going alone." "I have to. This is family. Exactly why you shouldn't face it alone." He held the elevator door. "Besides, you might need a witness." The drive to Tom's house was silent except for the rustle of papers as Daniel reviewed more statements. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother's not just manipulating people. She's committing serious fraud." "I know." "Then why haven't you—" "Because prison's too easy." I turned onto Tom's street. "She needs to lose everything she values first. Her reputation, her social standing, her control." Emily's car sat in Tom's driveway, its driver's door still open. Inside, voices echoed from the kitchen. "You promised!" Emily's voice shook. "You said this was just about protecting the family assets." "It is." Mother's tone was silk over steel. "And you're going to help me finish it unless you want everyone to know about those irregularities in your real estate licenses." I stepped into the doorway. "What irregularities would those be, Mother?" She spun around, face composed except for a slight twitch near her left eye. "Katherine, what a surprise." "Is it?" I moved closer, Daniel a steady presence behind me. "Or did you expect me once you started targeting Tom? I'm protecting your brother from your father's mistakes." She smiled at Tom, who stood pale and rigid by the sink. Someone has to think about this family's future. By stealing his house? By threatening Emily? "Threatening?" Mother laughed. "Emily and I are dear friends, aren't we, Emily?" Emily stared at her hands. "Laura, please, this isn't what we discussed. What we discussed doesn't matter anymore." Mother's voice hardened. "What matters is loyalty. Something my children seem to have forgotten." "Loyalty?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through documents. "Like the loyalty you showed Father when you started embezzling from his company, or when you forged his signature on loan applications." Her composure cracked slightly. "You've been spying on me." "No, Mother. I've been watching you destroy our family for years. Now I'm finally doing something about it." She moved suddenly, reaching for my phone. Daniel stepped between us. "That's enough, Laura," he said quietly. Mother's eyes narrowed. And who exactly are you? Someone who's seen enough evidence to know you're in serious trouble. She looked around the kitchen, at Tom's distress, Emily's fear, my determination. For a moment, something like uncertainty crossed her face. Then she smiled, reaching for her purse. Well, this has been enlightening. Tom, darling, we'll discuss the house later. Emily, I expect those papers by tomorrow. If you touch Tom's house, I said as she reached the door, I'll release everything. Every transaction, every forged document, every threat. She paused, hand on the doorknob. You wouldn't dare destroy this family. You already have. I'm just making sure everyone knows who's responsible. After she left, Emily broke down, confessing everything. Tom paced, processing the revelations. Daniel quietly documented it all. And I finally saw the path forward clearly. Mother had taught me well about masks and manipulation. Now it was time to put those lessons to use. Daniel's apartment became our war room, walls covered with financial records and sticky notes mapping Mother's web of deception. 3 weeks of late nights had revealed a pattern more intricate than I'd imagined. Look at this. Daniel pointed to a series of transactions. Every major withdrawal coincides with a deposit into Emily's account, then gets redistributed to these shell companies. I traced the money trail with my finger. She's been planning this for years. Planning what? To make Father look incompetent. Each failed investment, every poor business decision, she orchestrated all of it. My phone buzzed. Father's name lit up the screen. Katherine. His voice sounded tired. Are you busy? 20 minutes later, I found him in his office, surrounded by empty boxes. The nameplate on his desk, Michael Reynolds, CEO, lay face down. The board voted this morning, he said without looking up, effective immediately. My throat tightened. They can't do that. You built this company. With fraudulent loans, apparently. He finally met my eyes. Did you know? About what? Your mother's activities. He pushed a folder across the desk. The board received these anonymously. Inside were copies of loan applications, all bearing his forged signature. But something was wrong. The dates, the amounts, they didn't match my research. These are fake, I said. They're very real. He rubbed his face. Laura admitted everything when they confronted her. Said she was trying to save the company from my mismanagement. My phone buzzed again. Tom. Mom's calling everyone. Says Dad embezzled millions. People are believing her. She's lying, I told Father. I can prove it. It doesn't matter anymore. He stood, starting to pack his desk. The damage is done. I drove straight to Daniel's, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. He opened the door before I could knock. Your mother just called the office, he said. She's telling everyone your father. I know. I pushed past him to our evidence wall. But these dates are wrong. She's created a whole new narrative. How? Emily. I yanked down several documents. She didn't just help Mother hide money. She helped her create a paper trail framing Father. Daniel caught my arm as I reached for more papers. Kathy, stop. Think. Why now? Because... I froze, realization hitting like ice water. The charity gala. She's hosting it next week. At the country club, Daniel nodded, where everyone who matters will be watching. She's not just destroying Father's reputation. My laugh sounded hollow. She's going to play the victim in front of the entire social circle. The loyal wife who discovered her husband's betrayal. My phone lit up with messages. Society friends expressing shock and sympathy, all to Mother. Board members distancing themselves from Father. Even Tom's in-laws were questioning their connection to our family. She's winning, I whispered. Daniel studied the evidence wall. Maybe not. Look at the real timeline we've built. If we could prove these new documents are forgeries, we'd need Emily's help. I pulled out my phone. And she's terrified of Mother. Then we give her something more terrifying. Daniel grabbed his laptop. Your mother's not the only one who can create a paper trail. I watched him work, something cold settling in my chest. You want to threaten Emily? I want to give her a choice. He turned the screen toward me. Between your mother's threats and actual proof of her own crimes, the document he'd created detailed every fraudulent transaction Emily had processed, every false document she'd notarized, enough to end her career, possibly send her to prison. This makes us just like her, I said quietly. No. Daniel closed the laptop. It makes us better players at her game. My phone buzzed one final time. Mother. Darling, I need you at the gala planning meeting tomorrow. Time to show everyone how our family handles crisis with grace. I stared at the message, remembering every lesson she'd taught me about manipulation and control, about using people's fears against them, about winning at any cost. Make the call to Emily, I told Daniel. He hesitated. Are you sure? I looked at Father's nameplate, which I'd taken from his desk, at the evidence of Mother's betrayal surrounding us, at the years of calculated destruction she'd orchestrated. Mother always said I was just like her. I picked up my phone. Time to prove her right. Emily's hand shook as she slid the USB drive across the cafe table. Everything's here. Transaction records, forged documents, even Laura's private emails. She glanced nervously over her shoulder. If she finds out, she won't. I pocketed the drive. Unless you tell her. You don't understand. She's planning something big for the gala. Something about Sophie. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What about Sophie? I overheard her on the phone. She's using Tom's custody agreement against him. Said something about proving Sarah unfit. The cup clattered against the saucer. Of course, Mother would target Sophie, the one person Tom would sacrifice everything to protect. My phone buzzed. Daniel, your mother just called a board meeting, emergency session. I have to go. I stood, leaving cash for the coffee. Remember our deal, Emily? One word to Mother. I know. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The evidence goes public. The elevator ride to the boardroom felt endless. Through the glass walls, I could see Mother holding court, dressed impeccably in pearl grey. The perfect grieving wife. Katherine. She smiled as I entered. Perfect timing. I was just explaining the new company structure. The board members avoided my gaze. Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. Given the circumstances, we feel it's best to implement immediate changes. Changes? I scanned the room. Where's Tom? Your brother has taken a leave of absence. Mother's voice carried just the right note of concern. The stress of your father's actions has been difficult for him. Lies. Tom would never abandon the company voluntarily, unless... My phone vibrated. Tom. Mom has proof Sarah relapsed, says she'll use it unless I step down. The board has appointed me interim CEO, Mother continued smoothly, to restore stability and trust. The room spun slightly. All those years of careful planning, of gathering evidence, she'd outmaneuvered us again. Congratulations, I managed. I'm sure Father would be proud. Her smile flickered. Speaking of your father, he's agreed to seek treatment. The strain of his financial improprieties clearly affected his judgment. Treatment. She'd somehow convinced him to admit himself to a facility, to complete her narrative of the troubled businessman who'd lost his way. Chairman Wilson stood. We'll release a statement this afternoon. Katherine, given your position and family connection, we think it's best if you take some time off as well. Of course. I gathered my things, feeling Mother's triumphant gaze. I wouldn't want to compromise the company's recovery. Daniel was waiting in my office. How bad? She's won. I sank into my chair. The company, Tom's position, Sophie's custody, she's taking everything. Not yet. He pulled out his laptop. The USB from Emily. I handed it over, watching him work. After a moment, he turned the screen toward me. Look at these timestamps. The documents framing your father. They were created after he was forced out. She's getting sloppy. It doesn't matter. I gestured at the empty office. She has control now. Then we move up the timeline. Daniel leaned forward. The gala's tomorrow night. Every major player in town will be there, including the DA's office. You want to expose her publicly? I want to give her exactly what she wants, all eyes on her perfect performance. Then we show everyone who she really is. My phone lit up with a text from Sophie. Dad's acting weird. Grandma says we're moving to the summer house. What's happening? The summer house, where Mother could isolate them, control the narrative completely. If we do this, I said slowly, there's no going back. The company, our reputation, the family, everything changes. It's already changed. Daniel's hand covered mine. The question is, who controls the ending? I thought of Father, alone in some facility, of Tom, sacrificing his career for Sophie, of every calculated move Mother had made to build her empire of lies. The gala starts at 8, I said. We'll need Emily's help one more time. She might run. No. I pulled up Mother's latest email, an invitation to join her at the head table tomorrow night, the prodigal daughter returning to support her family. She'll do exactly what Mother taught us both to do. Which is? I showed him my RSVP. Looking forward to celebrating with you, Mother. You deserve everything that's coming. She'll wait for the perfect moment to strike. The country club ballroom glittered like a jewel box, but all I could see was Mother's reflection, multiplied in every mirror, each version of her more perfect than the last. She stood at the podium, resplendent in black silk, addressing the crowd with practiced grief. In times of crisis, family is everything. Her voice caught perfectly. Though Michael's actions have shocked us all, we must focus on healing. Daniel's hand brushed mine under the table. The USB drive felt heavy in my clutch. One presentation, already loaded onto the club's system, waiting for Emily's signal. Where's Tom? I whispered. Still not here. Daniel checked his phone. No response. Mother continued. As the new CEO of Reynolds Industries, I promised to restore not just our company's reputation, but our family's legacy. The audience applauded. I scanned the crowd, board members, society matrons, even the district attorney, all hanging on her performance. But no Emily. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. Check your email, now. The attachment showed Sophie and Tom at the summer house, timestamp from an hour ago. Below it, a message. Mother knows. They're safe. Stay away. Emily's not coming. My voice sounded distant. Mother has them. Daniel started to stand. We can still... Ladies and gentlemen, Mother's voice cut through the murmur. I'd like to invite my daughter Katherine to say a few words about family, about truth. The spotlight found me. Hundreds of eyes turned, expecting the dutiful daughter's support of her brave mother. I rose slowly, each step toward the podium feeling like moving through water. Mother's smile never wavered, but her eyes were arctic. I've learned so much about family recently, I began. The prepared speech felt like ashes in my mouth. About loyalty, about consequences. Mother's smile tightened fractionally. In the crowd, I spotted the DA leaning forward. My mother. I stopped, seeing Tom's face in my mind, Sophie's future hanging by a thread. Go on, darling. Mother touched my arm, her fingers like steel. Tell them what you've discovered. The USB drive weighed 1,000 pounds. Every piece of evidence, every carefully gathered proof of her crimes, useless against her final manipulation. My mother has shown incredible strength, I heard myself say. Taking control of the company, protecting our family's interests while Father recovers. The words tasted like poison. Mother's grip relaxed slightly. I know there have been rumors, I continued. Questions about certain financial decisions. Daniel stood abruptly, but I couldn't look at him. I want to clarify that any irregular transactions were authorized by my father. Mother simply tried to hide them, to protect him, to protect all of us. The lie hung in the air like smoke. Mother's smile widened triumphantly. Thank you, Katherine. She embraced me, whispering, Sophie will be so relieved. The rest of the evening blurred. I watched Mother accept condolences, praise for her resilience. Watched the DA leave, satisfied there was no story here. Watched my chance at justice evaporate like morning dew. Daniel found me on the terrace, staring at nothing. "She won," I said before he could speak. "She finally taught me what family really means. Kathy, it means knowing exactly where to put the knife." I pulled out my phone, showing him the summer house photo. She knew. All along, she knew what we were planning, and she made sure I knew the cost of betrayal. "We can find another way." "There is no other way." I deleted the presentation file, then dropped the USB drive into my champagne glass. She'll always be one step ahead, holding someone I love hostage. "So you're giving up?" "No." I watched the champagne fizz around the sinking drive. "I'm accepting that she won, that she'll always win." Mother appeared in the doorway, radiant in victory. "Katherine, the board members would love to hear more about your new role in the company." I stood, smoothing my dress. "Of course, Mother. That's my girl." She touched my cheek, her fingers still cold. "You see? Family always comes first." As I followed her inside, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the terrace doors. Mother and daughter, perfectly matched in black, perfectly poised. I couldn't tell which of us was the better liar anymore. The summer house stood dark against the twilight sky, its windows like empty eyes. I found Mother in Father's study, methodically feeding documents into a shredder. "I wondered when you'd come." She didn't look up. "Tom and Sophie left an hour ago. You just missed them." "I know. I sent them away." That made her pause. "Did you?" Emily helped. I moved closer, watching paper disappear into mechanical teeth. She's quite cooperative when she's not terrified. Emily's loyalty was always negotiable. Mother smiled thinly. "Unlike yours, apparently. You taught me well." I picked up a half-shredded document. A familiar signature caught my eye. Not Father's forgery, but the original. Though I learned some lessons you didn't intend. Such as, always keep copies. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. "Everything you're destroying, already uploaded to the cloud, and to the DA's office." The shredder whirred to a stop. Mother's fingers tightened on its edge. "You're bluffing." "Like you bluffed about Sophie, about Tom's custody battle." I stepped closer. There was no evidence against Sarah, was there? Just another manipulation. "I did what was necessary." She straightened, smoothing her blazer. "To protect this family." "No." The word felt like breaking glass. "You did what was necessary to protect your control. There's a difference. Control is protection." Her voice hardened. "Look what happened when your father lost control. When you tried to take it from me." I learned from the best. I moved to the window, watching shadows lengthen across the lawn. "Did you ever wonder why I gave up so easily at the gala?" Something flickered in her reflection. "Uncertainty?" "You understood the consequences. I understood the opportunity." I turned back to her. "Everyone watching you win. Everyone seeing you at your most triumphant. Your perfect moment. What have you done?" "Check your phone, Mother. The board's probably trying to reach you." She grabbed her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled. With each message, her face grew paler. "Anonymous tips." My voice stayed steady. "Bank records, witness statements, all pointing to your masterful takeover of the company. Your brilliant manipulation of Father's downfall." "They'll never believe." "They already do. That's what happens when you craft such a perfect narrative. People want to believe the bigger story." The phone slipped from her hand. "You're just like me," she whispered. "That's what makes this work." I picked up her phone, showing her the growing cascade of messages. "I learned from you that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about precision. I'll fight this." "With what allies?" "Emily's testimony is already recorded. Tom's safe with Sophie, beyond your reach. Even your social circle is turning. Amazing how quickly sympathy becomes scandal." She moved suddenly, reaching for the desk drawer where she kept her emergency files. I caught her wrist. "Looking for these?" I held up a key. "Daniel cleared those out hours ago." while you were busy watching me. Katherine, her voice cracked slightly. I'm your mother. Yes. I released her wrist. That's why I'm giving you a choice. Something you never gave any of us. Her eyes narrowed. What choice? Resign quietly. Disappear to that villa in France you bought with father's money. Or stay and fight. Watch everything you built crumble piece by piece. You wouldn't dare destroy this family's reputation. You already did that. I walked to the door. I'm just making sure everyone knows who's responsible. Katherine, her command voice, the one that used to make me freeze. Don't you walk away from me. I paused, hand on the doorknob. That's the difference between us, Mother. I learned how to walk away. You never could. I made you who you are. No. I looked back one last time. You showed me who I didn't want to become. The study door closed behind me with a soft click. Through it, I heard something shatter. A paperweight, maybe, or her carefully constructed world. Outside, Daniel waited in the car. Is it done? I watched lights begin to flicker on in the summer house windows, like stars emerging in a dark sky. Mother would be getting more calls soon, more messages, more consequences. Yes, I said, it's done. We drove away as night fell, leaving Mother alone with the ghosts of her machinations. I didn't look back. She'd taught me that too, never show weakness in victory. Some lessons stick, even when we don't mean them to. The French villa's gates opened silently, revealing manicured gardens bathed in Mediterranean sunshine. Mother's new sanctuary, bought with the remnants of her carefully hidden assets. She waited in the courtyard, thinner than I remembered, but still elegant in cream linen. 6 months hadn't dimmed her ability to command a space. Katherine, she gestured to a table set for tea. I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. I remained standing. Father's awake. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. From the breakdown I orchestrated. Her smile was bitter. How charitable of them. He's taking back the company. Tom's helping him rebuild. And you? She poured tea with steady hands. Still playing vigilante with Daniel? Actually, I'm here about Sophie. I watched her fingers tighten on the porcelain. She's graduating next month. Wants her grandmother there. After everything you've done, after everything you did, I finally sat, meeting her gaze. Sophie doesn't know the whole story. That's her gift to you. The choice is yours. Mother set down her cup. You've gotten better at manipulation. I had an excellent teacher. Yes. Something flickered in her eyes. Pride, regret. Though I never expected you to surpass me. Didn't you? Isn't that what you trained us for? To be perfect reflections of your ambition? She stood abruptly, moving to the garden's edge. I wanted you to be strong, to never need anyone's approval. While demanding our absolute loyalty, protection requires control. No, I joined her at the balustrade. Protection requires trust, something you never learned. Below us, gardeners tended Mother's immaculate roses. Everything perfectly ordered, perfectly controlled, even in exile. I received your wedding invitation, she said quietly. Did you burn it like the others? I kept it, she turned, studying my face. You look happy, despite everything, not despite, because. I touched the balustrade's sun-warmed stone. You taught me what to avoid becoming. That's worth something. Such a diplomatic way to thank me for being a cautionary tale. Would you prefer I thanked you for showing me how power corrupts, or how loyalty can become poison? Her laugh held no humor. Still so righteous, so certain of your moral high ground. No, I met her gaze steadily. Just certain that there are better ways to love. Love, she spat the word like venom. Love is weakness. I made you strong. You made me afraid. There's a difference. Inside the villa, a phone rang. Mother tensed, old habits dying hard, always waiting for the next crisis, the next battle. Sophie's graduation is on the 15th, I said, turning to leave. There's a ticket to Nice in the invitation. If you want it. Katherine, her voice stopped me. Do you ever wonder if you're becoming me? Using people's weaknesses, manipulating outcomes? Every day. I look back. That's what makes me different. I choose not to. Choice is an illusion we create to feel better about our nature. Maybe I reach the courtyard gate, or maybe it's the only thing that separates us from our worst instincts. Will you come back? The question held an unfamiliar note, uncertainty. That depends. On what? On whether you're ready to be a mother instead of a puppet master. I left her there, framed by roses and regret, her tea growing cold on the table. Daniel waited in the rental car, asking nothing but holding my hand as we drove away. My phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. Did she say yes? I watched Mother's villa disappear in the rearview mirror, thinking of choices and consequences, of love and control, of the fine line between protection and possession. We'll see, I typed back, because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in destroying someone's world, but in letting them glimpse a better one, and leaving them to decide if they're brave enough to change. Mother had taught me that too, though she never meant to. Some lessons cut deeper than others, leaving scars that shape us into something stronger than steel, more resilient than pride, something like hope.
Even though I was pressured by Scott and his mother, I had difficulty conceiving. One day when I returned home, I found Scott, just back from a business trip, with Kelly holding twins in our house. Look. I gave birth to twins. Congratulations. I responded formally, and then Kelly made a shocking statement. Scott is the father. What? Both of them had a malicious smile on their faces. Sorry, you're just a barren defect. So, you're useless to us now. I'm going to remarry her, so let's get divorced. As Scott and Kelly left, I stood there in shock, then the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. I heard that divorced Kelly returned to her hometown, so I set her up with Scott. She got pregnant right away, truly a model daughter-in-law. She chuckled. Did you encourage them? Yes, I did. Even after the call ended, I held onto my phone, fuming. Scott, Kelly, and my mother-in-law. I will make them regret what they've done to me. Be prepared. My name is Anna, a 42-year-old housewife. Scott and I married 3 years ago after meeting at a friend's wedding. He had a fresh and clean presence with a bright smile that I found appealing. Scott seemed interested in me too, and after the wedding reception, he suggested we start dating. Our relationship, intended for marriage, began, and 2 years later, we were married. My mother-in-law was warmly welcoming at the introduction, but clung to Scott and sobbed at the wedding. Guests chuckled at her clinginess, typical of a mother of an only child, I thought. And I was relaxed about getting along with Scott. I could never have imagined what the future held. Scott, who cared so much for me during the relationship, suddenly changed as soon as he got married. That doesn't mean he has become an abusive man. He began to give me orders and try to get me to obey him. Anna is precious to me. I want to protect Anna from other men. With that excuse, Scott began to overly interfere and dominate me. The first issues were about my clothes and makeup. Scott frowned uncomfortably when he saw me about to go shopping in a sleeveless dress. Do you want to be approached by other men? What? Confused by his question, Scott added. You're exposing too much skin. It's indecent. You should wear something appropriate for a married woman. I didn't understand what was indecent about a knee-length dress, but asked anyway. Then, Scott, what do you think I should wear? Scott then pulled a character-patterned sweatsuit from the closet and handed it to me. Anna, you really don't have any proper clothes, do you? These are the only pants you have other than pajamas. What? Are all skirts bad? Of course. What if they blow up in the wind? There are lots of weird people out there. You need to be more careful. Lectured seriously, I felt discouraged. It might just be a matter of differing values. I couldn't bring myself to go out in home clothes, so I postponed the shopping. The next day, a bunch of plain sweatsuits arrived addressed to me.
Yeah.
This is about right. You're married to me, you don't need to dress up outside. Scott said it cheerfully, but I protested. Then where should I wear all the outdoor clothes that are overflowing in the closet? Wear them at home. You don't need to show them to anyone else. Actually, you don't need makeup either, right? Sunscreen is enough. Scott smiled. Maybe you should stop going to the hairdresser? If you really need to, I can cut your hair. I was horrified. Is this man sane? But, I'm paying for makeup and haircutting with my salary. It's a bit much to say that. Timidly making my case, Scott thought for a moment and then decided. All right, I'll allow makeup and hairdressing. But from now on, you'll go out dressed as I say. You're my wife, after all. Understood. Although I agreed, it was impossible to go downtown dressed like I was cleaning. Reluctantly, I resorted to changing into a dress in the station's restroom to go shopping or meet friends. Scott allowed me to go to the hairdresser, but he complained about my hairstyle. Since you're my wife, I want you to stop having hairstyles that appeal to men. Worn down by his persistent comments, I changed my brightly dyed brown hair to black with gray coverage. I also cut my long, permed hair and changed it to a short bob. Anna, you look different. People I bumped into were surprised, but explaining in detail was too troublesome. So I just smiled vaguely to gloss it over. Honestly, I didn't like being dictated to by my husband about everything. But hearing, Anna is my wife, I don't want her to stand out too much. And it worries me that other men might show interest in her, made it hard to complain. Ultimately, I convinced myself it was all done out of love and had no choice but to comply. Moreover, Scott didn't look too happy when I met up with friends. Every time, I had to report who I was going with, what time I would return, and even send a photo as proof to Scott's phone. If men were present at the dinner, even if they were friends' husbands, Scott would sulk every time. When I did attend, Scott would always come to pick me up. I'll head straight home once it's over, I'd tell him, but he was afraid I'd get too close to other men. I wasn't trusted. Your husband really treasures you. It's because you're newlyweds. I tired of brushing off these half-joking comments with a wry smile. Despite this, Scott justified his weekly outings as work-related, drinking every weekend. When I pointed this out, unable to agree, Scott pursed his lips. It's not like I want to go, it's just social obligations. If I cut back on these, it could affect my job and lead to a salary cut. Don't you understand? He half laughed as he said. If my salary decreases, it'll be tough for you too, right? Since you earn less than I do. I was frustrated, but as it was true, I couldn't argue back. The members are my bosses and subordinates, so I can't take photos. But don't worry, I'm not doing anything shady. So asserted, I found myself unable to complain. Scott was rarely at home, claiming overtime on weekdays and social drinking on weekends. Yet he was eager for children. But it wasn't out of a love for children, it was for his mother, who wanted grandchildren. I want to let mom hold her grandchild while she's still healthy. A boy would be ideal, but a girl would be fine for starters. He casually dropped such presumptuous lines. Oh, it didn't work out this month either? I really want to fulfill mom's wish soon. I also want to have a child soon. Scott patted my shoulder as if to console me. Well, I'm counting on you then. I'm looking forward to it. His detached attitude was exasperating. Did he think I could make a baby on my own? As our second year of marriage approached without any sign of pregnancy, I began to suspect natural conception might be difficult. I had been monitoring my menstrual cycle and basal body temperature and was careful with my diet. Hearing that being cold was bad for pregnancy, I took warm half baths for over 30 minutes and warmed my body with ginger and herbal teas. I did everything I could. However, Scott seemed uninterested when I talked about such efforts and lived carefreely. Cut back on smoking and drinking, I'd repeatedly tell him. But he seemed to have no intention of complying. Furthermore, even after I suggested having intercourse 2 days before ovulation for better chances of pregnancy, he would schedule fishing trips or drinking sessions instead. I started to doubt his sincerity about wanting children. Meanwhile, it was clear that his mother was eager for grandchildren. My in-laws' house, where we frequently visited during holidays upon her invitations, was an hour's drive away. She seemed to prefer including me, although calling Scott alone would suffice. My father-in-law, retired but busy with golf and volunteering, was often absent, leaving me to socialize with my stay-at-home mother-in-law. Her hobby was gossiping about the neighbors, and she often dragged me into conversations about grandchildren, pressuring, "Hurry up and have one. Listen, Anna. Mrs. Simpson keeps bragging about her third grandchild. Such a nasty character, right?
Yeah.
And Mrs. Holmes, she's got a second son now. Plus, her son lives with her. So considerate, don't you think?" Yes. She wanted to live with us at my in-laws' house. But Scott had refused before we married due to the distance from his work, which displeased her. So, she seemed to say, "At least give me a grandchild to satisfy me." This topic went on endlessly, and I wished Scott would deal with it. But whenever we visited, he would immediately go out with friends. Scott is always working hard, he wants to see his friends too. Of course, she defended Scott, but being left at my in-laws put a lot of stress on me. The meals were prepared by my mother-in-law, and I took care of the cleanup. There were no mean comments or sarcasm, just rush to say, "I want my grandson as soon as possible." 2 years into marriage and still no child? When will I be able to hold my grandchild? Hey? You're not doing this to spite me, are you? I finally snapped back sharply after being nagged repeatedly. No, that's not it. Really? But at this rate, I'm worried I won't meet them while I'm still alive. Right, Scott? As Scott played with his phone, he chuckled and replied, "Oh, come on, Mom. Anna is trying hard, right? So why does he act like it's none of his business?" As these interactions between Scott and his mother continued, my frustration grew. However, entering our 3rd year of marriage, Scott suddenly stopped talking about children. At the same time, his weekend work and business trips increased unexpectedly. Scott used to occasionally invite me for nights out on weekends. But suddenly, those invites stopped. Even when I tentatively suggested it, he curtly declined with, "I'm busy, maybe next time." His mother acted similarly. When I showed up at my in-laws' house, which used to be filled with incessant talks about other people's grandchildren, everything changed. She didn't mention them at all, as if she had become a different person. One day, I arrived at my in-laws' house earlier than planned. As usual, I parked my car in a nearby coin-operated parking lot and walked to their house. Scott said he would come later after finishing some errands, so I was there alone. Then, I saw a woman in a relaxed dress talking amiably with my mother-in-law at the entrance. I was so happy to hear that divorced Kelly came back to her hometown. "We'll be counting on you from now on. Likewise, please take care of me." Our eyes met, and my mother-in-law's cheeks stiffened suddenly. Kelly, looking back at me with a curious glance, smiled meaningfully and greeted me. Nice to meet you. I'm Kelly Baker, living nearby.
Ah.
Hello. Kelly scrupulously looked me over from head to toe and smirked. Thank you for today, Kelly. We'll see you again soon. Despite seeming in the middle of their conversation, my mother-in-law hurriedly ended it and sent Kelly away. After taking me inside, my mother-in-law was cheerfully brewing coffee but seemed distracted. Eventually, Scott joined us, and my mother-in-law took him to another room for a private talk. When he returned, Scott was all smiles, which was odd for the entire day. I met Kelly again 6 months later. She showed up at the apartment where Scott and I lived, carrying newly born twins. Scott, who had been away on a business trip for 2 days, was already home when I returned from work. And for some reason, Kelly was with him. Look. I gave birth to twins. Congratulations. While Kelly enthusiastically showed off the babies, I responded formally and then asked Scott. Welcome back. By the way, why is Ms. Baker here? Before Scott could answer, Kelly responded. Actually, I'm Scott's ex-girlfriend. Oh, is that so? My nonchalant response seemed to irritate Kelly. Don't you get it? Are you stupid? What? Then Kelly dropped a bombshell. The twins' father is Scott. What? Unable to comprehend the situation, I stood dumbfounded as Scott wrapped his arm around Kelly's waist and pressed his cheek against hers. I should have married you back then. I was shocked by our breakup and made a wrong choice. We can start over now. I'm favored by your mother and will definitely get along well. Scott smiled happily at a confident Kelly. Mom has always liked Kelly. She was thrilled when we got back together. Plus, she got pregnant right away, with boys too. Mom praised her, saying, well done. Right? Unlike someone. The two shared a cruel laugh and then looked at me with malicious grins. Sorry, you're just a barren defect. So, you're useless to us now. I'm tired of you always doing as I say. I'm going to remarry her, so let's divorce. Dumbfounded, I stood there as Scott told me. I'm kind enough to give you a week. Find a new place and move out by then. Here, sign this divorce paper and submit it to the city hall. Scott left the divorce papers on the dining table and left the house with Kelly. Their laughter echoed down the apartment corridor. Was I just discarded? The control Scott had over me wasn't love, it was merely his desire to dominate. As I gazed at the divorce papers and stood there dazed, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. If you interfere with those two, I won't forgive you. She spoke harshly, intimidating me. I never liked you from the start. I always wondered why Scott chose such a plain woman. Sorry for being plain. I apologized sarcastically. I thought I'd acknowledge you as a daughter-in-law if you gave birth to a grandchild. But you're utterly useless. You're brainless. She spat out her words venomously. I told Scott that Kelly had come back home. Those two got back together right away. They're really a perfect match. I wonder why they ever broke up. Did you instigate the affair? I asked in shock, and my mother-in-law casually admitted it without a hint of shame. Yes, that's right. I wanted Kelly to be my daughter-in-law. Getting pregnant so quickly, she's truly the ideal bride. She sounded utterly pleased with herself. So it's all my fault for not getting pregnant? Of course. There's no point in having a daughter-in-law who can't bear children. If that's the case, it's better to replace her with another woman. She stated this outrageous philosophy as if it were nothing. So just sign the divorce papers and disappear quickly. After a tirade, my mother-in-law hung up the phone. I continued to grip my phone for a while after the call ended, dizzy with anger, frustration, and a sense of humiliation. What do these people think of me? I can't let this go, the indignation is eating me up inside. Clenching my back teeth, I swore revenge. Scott, his mother, and Kelly. I will make sure they deeply regret causing me such pain. They should be prepared. Hey, haven't you moved out yet? It's been well over a week. Scott kept calling and messaging daily, but I used my busy schedule as an excuse to drag things out. Even after submitting the divorce papers, there were plenty of things to do. A week later, when I was ready, I summoned Scott, Kelly, and my mother-in-law to the apartment. All three showed up with sour expressions. Kelly wants to live in the apartment I've been in rather than a new one. So we've decided on this place. Get out already. It's not right to keep imposing on my parents-in-law forever. Since you filed for divorce, move on. It seems like you're still hung up on Scott, but he belongs to Kelly now. As the three of them started making a scene at the dining table, I calmly addressed them. Scott and Kelly sat together, with my mother-in-law across from them. I served coffee for everyone and sat next to my mother-in-law, speaking sharply. I have no lingering feelings for this man. A man who lies, controls his wife, and has children with an affair partner is the last thing I want. Perhaps my words struck a chord because Scott looked visibly uncomfortable. Anyway, as long as you're squatting here, we can't move in. Oh, did you forget? My parents paid the down payment and half of the purchase price for this room. Did they? Scott blinked in confusion. It's incredible how he forgets things that don't suit him. Despite bragging about his high salary at a big company. It's not much to boast about, I thought with a snort. We split the rest between us. Since my parents and I contributed more, I put it in my name. So, it's my apartment. Kelly and my mother-in-law were shocked. Scott, that's not what you told me. Scott, well, fine. Keep the place. Kelly, let's find another apartment. Scott tried to sound magnanimous, but Kelly pouted. I was looking forward to spending time in Scott's study. Fine, I'll ask Dad to buy us a high-rise condo. It's only because of Scott's earnings that you could live here. And now you're boasting like that? What a wicked daughter-in-law. I knew it. So, are we done here? To her discontented grumble, I smiled confidently. No, the main topic is just about to begin. The main topic? I called you here because I've gathered evidence to report. I pulled out an investigation report. And about 10 photos from a large envelope and laid them on the dining table. At this, Scott and Kelly's faces turned pale, and they started to panic. They scrambled to collect the photos and hid them in their pockets and bags, prompting an annoyed reaction from my mother-in-law. What was that? I couldn't see. Don't worry. There are plenty more images I haven't printed yet. I then showed the images on my phone, sliding through them as my mother-in-law watched. Scott and Kelly screamed and tried to snatch the phone, but I swatted their hands away. As my mother-in-law peered into the phone screen, her face changed color. You too. You have other partners too? Their disturbance was natural. The screen displayed images of Kelly and Scott each arm in arm with different partners, entering and leaving hotels. Come on, Mom. Don't believe that. Anna must have fabricated them. Yes, that's right. She looks timid but is cunning. As they scrambled to make excuses, I countered. A novice like me couldn't possibly take such good evidence photos. I hired a detective agency to investigate the infidelity. So these are definitely genuine. If you doubt it, why not call the agency yourself? I handed out the detective agency's business card, and Scott and Kelly fell silent, their faces sour. Eventually, unable to bear the silence, Scott confessed.
Yeah.
That's right. I've been seeing other people besides Kelly. It's my money I'm spending, I can do what I want with it. Got a problem with that? Other men won't leave me alone. I can't help it. Wait, Scott, you said I was the only one. You big liar. Kelly, burning with anger, and Scott, equally aggressive. You too. Saying, I can finally be with Scott, it's like a dream. Are any men fine for you? Enough. She scolded them both. Holding her forehead, she lamented in a dismayed tone. I'm disappointed in both of you. After all the arrangements I made, this is a letdown. Seeing my mother-in-law's disappointment, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Shaking my shoulders as Scott, Kelly, and my mother-in-law stared at me puzzled. Sorry, it's just funny seeing mother pretending to be a reasonable person. I'm sure you'll be cheated on. Because you don't support Shinya as a daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law, this time, turned her attention to me. She continues to nag and make sarcastic remarks as usual. If you had properly devoted yourself to Scott and had children, he wouldn't have strayed to Kelly. In the end, it's all your fault. Despite her own role in orchestrating their affair, she had the audacity to say such things. As I stood speechless, Scott and Kelly jumped on the bandwagon, shouting in chorus. That's right. It's all Anna's fault. If you can't satisfy your husband or have children, it's only natural he'd lose interest. Poor Scott.
Yeah.
By the way, Mother, you're quite active yourself, aren't you? When I spread a different set of photos across the table, my mother-in-law gasped, speechless. Scott and Kelly, peering directly at the photos, let out absurd exclamations. Hey, seriously? Is that Mom's guy? Eek, a lover from overseas? Mother, not bad. Scott and Kelly were astonished, and I just smiled. There's also audio from the date. Wow, I want to hear it. It's not something shady, is it? It seems like a detective agency recorded it at a cafe. Ignoring the flustered mother-in-law, I played the voice recorder. Francois, I'll have the money ready soon, just wait. Her upbeat tone was evident in her voice. The parent of Scott's new partner is wealthy. So I'll just flatter the daughter-in-law and get them to cough up the money. Kelly is simple, so it's easy. Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm glad, now my sister can have her surgery. I love you. My mother-in-law happily responded to his broken English. It's okay, about $30,000. I love you too. Scott and Kelly's eyes widened as they stared at my mother-in-law. Who is this Francois? Are you sure about his background? Don't make that face. It's fine. She laughed it off. He's an Italian working here. Met him on social media. He's poor and couldn't afford his sister's medical treatment for a rare disease, so I covered it. She spoke proudly, puffing out her chest. He said he prefers mature women with a nurturing spirit like me. I gave him $30,000 to start with, and he cried with joy. He's a good boy. Scott looked despairing as my mother-in-law seemed smitten. Where do I even begin? Francois is a French-sounding name. It must be all lies. Sounds like a scammer preying on women. Don't speak ill of Francois. Kelly, veins bulging in her temples, snapped back. So you were pushing us together just to give him money? Unbelievable, this old woman. Calm down, Kelly. Scott tried to soothe the infuriated Kelly. It's thanks to Mom that we got back together. I apologize, can't you forgive me? Scott. Scott patted a still discontent Kelly's head and smiled. I may have strayed to other women, but I still love you, Kelly. You also bore my children. Let's make up. Kelly softened at his words. You're right, I was wrong too. In the end, I love you the most, Scott. Let's keep getting along well. After gazing into each other's eyes for a moment, they both turned to face me. Are we done here? I need to go. We left the kids with the babysitter. We're busy taking care of the twins. You wouldn't understand, being dumped by Scott and all. I looked up at the wall clock. Just a moment longer. They should be arriving soon. Just as I spoke, the doorbell rang right on cue. I checked the intercom, saw the guests, and let them in. Scott, Kelly, and my mother-in-law looked puzzled at the two men who suddenly appeared. Dad? And who are you? Scott eyed the elderly man behind his father and asked. Forgotten already? He's the doctor I consulted for fertility testing, introduced by your father. Scott remembered, while Kelly showed panic. You were getting fertility tests? I didn't know about this. Didn't I mention it? Scott answered nonchalantly, while Kelly frowned. What brings you all the way here? Scott asked, puzzled, and I answered for the doctor. I went to speak to him directly, but you seemed too busy with Kelly and the twins. I explained the situation to your father and had him come here. Scott frowned at my explanation. The doctor met my gaze, I nodded, and he sighed softly before breaking the news. Actually, Scott, you have male infertility. There was a moment of icy silence, then Scott and his mother exclaimed in unison. What? Huh? While we all looked on, the doctor furrowed his brow and continued reluctantly. Anna has no issues. Scott, you have a very low sperm count. It's impossible for you to father children with such a condition. The doctor laid out the test results on the dining table, and Scott, Kelly, and my mother-in-law scrutinized them intently. Soon after, Scott and Kelly screamed. Me? No way, that's a lie. Give me a break. This is totally unexpected. They were completely panicked. Kelly, tearing at her hair and screaming in a shrill voice, exclaimed. I never thought you'd be infertile. Our plans are completely ruined now. What are we going to do? Plans? I got back with you because an employee at a major corporation had better prospects than a good-looking freelancer who claims to be a model. And now this? I've been deceived. In her agitated state, Kelly blurted out more than anyone asked for. Hearing this, Scott's expression turned demonic. Hey. I forgave your cheating, which caused our initial breakup. And now you've done the same thing again? I believed we could really start over this time. Scott clenched his fists, his voice low and growling with anger as he confronted Kelly. Huh? As if you have any right to blame me. You cheated with other women yourself. That was just for fun. It's completely different from what you did, you actually had kids. Amid such a low-level quarrel, I, my father-in-law, and the doctor were dumbfounded. We had no intention of intervening and silently watched the unfolding drama. I cut off the other guys and chose you to be the father. You should be thanking me instead of complaining. So, it wasn't my fault we couldn't have children, it was Scott who was infertile. Kelly, the defective barren one isn't me, it's Scott. I jumped into the conversation as Scott and Kelly looked at me resentfully. Undeterred, I quoted what Kelly and my mother-in-law had previously said to me. Remember what you told me, mother? A wife who can't have children is worthless. So, a husband who can't father children must be worthless too, right? I smiled triumphantly at my mother-in-law, who bit her lip in frustration and glared back. Expecting more harsh words from her, instead, my mother-in-law turned to Scott and Kelly, unleashing a thunderous scolding. I believed they were Scott's children. Unforgivable. This hussy. And Scott, you fell for such a wicked woman. Get a divorce right now. I don't need you to tell me that. I'm getting a divorce anyway. And don't you dare order me around when you've been cheating yourself, you old hag. Amid the ensuing chaos, my father-in-law sighed deeply. He walked over to me and apologized. I'm sorry my wife and son have caused such trouble. When I hired someone to investigate, it turned out she was cheating with a man who was involved with other women too. It took time to gather the evidence. Looking exhausted, he addressed Scott, my mother-in-law, and Kelly. Let's go home. We'll discuss the rest there. He calmed the nearly brawling trio with the help of the doctor and ushered them into the car, heading back to their family home. The day after I filed for divorce, Scott and Kelly, who had just remarried, ended up facing another divorce within a week. Both were heard complaining to friends and acquaintances. I never want to see that person's face or hear their voice again. While Scott and my mother-in-law ignored the advice from relatives, my mother-in-law finally listened when it was revealed she had been deceived by a scammer. She tried frantically to recover the money she had spent, but the scammer, already pursued by the police, had disappeared. After finding out she had used his retirement savings without permission, Scott's father served her with divorce papers. She cried and resisted but eventually gave in. It also came to light that she had accumulated debts in Scott's name, leading to a massive argument, with Scott's father and Scott moving out of the family home. My mother-in-law was left to live alone in their large house. After divorcing Kelly and moving into an apartment, Scott paid a lump sum of compensation into my account and continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, his past resurfaced when a local acquaintance joined his company and spilled the beans. The story of his remarriage to his ex-girlfriend and their quick divorce reached his superiors, who questioned his character. Relegated to a lesser department, Scott saw his salary significantly reduced. As soon as he became financially unstable, his former lovers distanced themselves, and he faced desperate days trying to pay off the debts his mother had accumulated. After divorcing Scott, Kelly moved back to her parents' house, where she lived leisurely with her twins, relying on her wealthy parents to pay the compensation in one go. She told them, I remarried Scott, but it didn't work out. However, after I sent a legal notice revealing Kelly's multiple affairs and uncertain paternity of her children, her parents were furious and kicked her out. Reluctantly, Kelly moved into a rundown apartment. Placing her twins in daycare, Kelly started working multiple jobs, tirelessly working day and night. Now free from anyone dictating my choice of clothes or hairstyle, I grew out my hair and dyed it my favorite color. I began shopping for cute clothes at my favorite stores and enjoyed meals with friends, relishing the happiness I had regained. My heart felt light and refreshed as I lived my days. Though my marriage had failed, I learned a valuable lesson about not being deceived by superficial kindness. Now, I plan to enjoy my work and personal life to the fullest, without worrying about anyone else's expectations.
In front of me was a scene I could hardly believe. The president's son was splashing beer on my grandson. My grandson had done nothing to harm anyone. On the contrary, he had been listening to and following the orders of the president's son. The son of the president who splashed the beer seemed truly delighted. Witnessing this situation, I felt an unprecedented level of anger rising within me. "Complain to me and you're fired." When I reproached him, he said that calmly. He was using his position as the president's son to threaten others. I couldn't remain silent after that. "Before that happens, you and your father will be fired." When I said that, he looked puzzled. But that was fine. By the time he understood what I meant, it would be too late. My name is John Hanson. I currently work as a janitor at an amusement park. This park is a place where I worked when I was young and is very dear to my heart. Various things happened, and I switched jobs once. But after retiring from the company I had been with, I started working as a temporary janitor. The amusement park is a dreamlike place where both adults and children can smile. I work here, enjoying seeing the smiles of the visitors, and I clean the park every day. However, in recent years, the declining number of visitors has become a major issue. One of the biggest reasons for the decline in visitors is that the management changed 10 years ago. In any business, to satisfy customers, it is necessary to meet their needs. However, the current management does not understand what the visitors to the park want at all. As a result, they are heading in a direction that is contrary to the demanded needs. Originally, this amusement park was themed around retro, which offered an atmosphere like stepping back into the past. Unique compared to other amusement parks. Adults reminisced about the old days, and children enjoyed an atmosphere they couldn't usually experience. However, lately, they have been incorporating modern attractions that completely destroy the retro concept, ruining the unique atmosphere. Most visitors leave dissatisfied. As sales have fallen year by year, the only option has been to cut labor costs, which in turn has led to a decline in service quality. This has accelerated customer departure, causing a vicious cycle where nothing seems to work out. The main person dragging the amusement park in the wrong direction is the president's son, Fred. Fred was a typical nepotism hire. Using his father's power fully, he became the vice president of the company shortly after joining. If he was genuinely trying to improve the amusement park, there might still be hope. But that's not the case with him. Currently, the president is too busy with other businesses to attend to the amusement park's operations, leaving it all to Fred. Fred enjoys having the freedom to do whatever he wants. Recently, due to the decrease in visitors and worsening management, meetings involving all employees are frequently held. However, no matter who suggests improvements to Fred, he refuses to listen. "Fred, we are currently short-staffed, which has significantly reduced the quality of our service. If this continues, we will lose even more customers. Please consider taking some measures." Trying to improve the situation, I actively speak up about improvement points and current problems at meetings. Most employees nod in agreement with what I say. However, Fred just sits there acting superior, ignoring everyone's opinions. "Huh? Aren't you just some old janitor? Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong." He mocks me with those words, and ultimately, the situation fails to improve. As time passes, it becomes spring. My grandson Nathan has just graduated from university. It was a surprise when he told me just before graduating that he had decided to work at the amusement park where I work. Nathan, won't you reconsider? You studied it at university, right? This isn't a place where you can utilize what you've learned. And more importantly, our company is currently in a tough situation. Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine. I've thought it through and made my decision. I opposed his joining the company and pleaded with him to reconsider numerous times. However, Nathan remained steadfast in his decision and eventually joined the company. I really want to help restore this amusement park that you love. Nathan fully understands how much I cherish the amusement park. That's why he wants to help fix it for my sake. Just a month after Nathan joined, the amusement park celebrated its 40th anniversary with a big party. The party, held at a luxury hotel, was attended by all the employees. Although I was just a temporary janitor, I was allowed to attend and sat at the very back. As it was a drinking occasion, many employees enjoyed their drinks and were moderately drunk. However, one person was behaving oddly. It was Fred. Fred, losing control at the party, seemed to be drinking heavily. His face was bright red and his eyes were glazed. "Hey, you, show us some talent." Pointing at the new employees, including Nathan, he demanded they perform on the spot. While many employees were confused by this unreasonable request, Nathan spoke up. "Yes, understood." In response, he started doing impersonations. Nathan is very serious by nature. Thus, trying to fulfill his boss's command, he did his best with the impersonations. However, the impromptu performance unfortunately did not resemble the intended subjects. "What is that? It's not even funny." Laughing at his earnest attempt, Fred approached him and poured beer over his head. Including me, those around were stunned by his sudden action. And Nathan, drenched in beer, was too shocked to move. He had been seriously following Fred's orders and doing his best. Yet, to have beer poured over him was just too cruel. I could still tolerate being verbally abused and ridiculed. But to see my grandson Nathan made a laughingstock and treated so horribly at such a celebratory event, even I have reached my limit. "What are you doing to my grandson?" I raised my voice like never before and protested to him. "Ha, this guy is your grandson, old man?" Even seeing me visibly angry, he showed no concern. Instead, he looked alternately at the still dazed Nathan and me, bursting out laughing while holding his stomach. "Hey, old man, if you complain to me, you and your grandson will both be fired, okay? Is that okay with you, even if your precious grandson becomes unemployed?" Leveraging his position as vice president, he threatened us instead of feeling any guilt for his actions. He thinks it's okay to do anything to us because we are lower in status than him. This outrageously unfair mindset made me feel even more furious from the bottom of my heart. Huh? Isn't that Mr. Hanson? Then I was approached from behind. Turning around, I saw Robert Owen, the president. What's wrong, Mr. Hanson? You've become quite shabby. He had the same unpleasant smile as Fred. Like father, like son. They both share these disagreeable traits. Huh, what? Dad, you know this janitor old man? Yes, that's right. After all, he's the former president who I pushed out. Seriously? Fred laughed heartily upon discovering my true identity. Yes, I am currently a temporary janitor, but in fact, I was the president of this company until 10 years ago. I was overseas for work, but during that time, Robert, who was my right-hand man and executive, betrayed me. Betrayed by someone I trusted, I tasted the greatest despair of my life. Robert had always been a smooth talker. Using his eloquence, he quickly won over the executives during my overseas inspection and took over the management company. We'll need you to leave the company. Realizing the situation, I was dumbfounded, and he told me I was fired, leaving me no choice but to resign. Of course, I was frustrated. But there was nothing I could do once things had come to this point. I gave up and quickly switched to another job. I worked there for several years and took early retirement. Even after changing jobs, I kept in touch only with trustworthy former subordinates. But one day, I was informed that the amusement park was in a precarious financial state. Unable to sit still, I searched for a way to work at the amusement park again and started working as a temporary janitor in disguise. Fred joined the company after I had left. Because our working periods did not overlap, he did not know about me. Additionally, since Robert had been hands-off with the amusement park operations, my true identity had never been discovered until now. Nathan chose this amusement park as his place of employment because he knew I had been the president here. I have always loved this amusement park and often brought Nathan here to play. That's why he understood how much I cared about and valued the amusement park. Thus, he joined this company, wanting to help restore the amusement park for my sake. Hilarious. So you were the founder? But such people are an eyesore. So you guys are fired. After saying that, Fred waved his hand dismissively, trying to shoo us away. I glared at him fiercely. Before that, you and your father will be fired. I spoke to the Owen family in a voice colder than I had ever used in my life. Huh? Us fired? What are you talking about? He must have thought I had lost my mind. Fred was laughing. However, I was perfectly sane. You may not be aware, but I am the majority shareholder of this company, holding over 51% of the shares. As I said that, the expression on Robert, who had been laughing along with him, began to cloud over. In fact, I had been desperately thinking of ways to improve the situation. And somehow, I managed to arrange a meeting with the bank, the investor in the amusement park. I was worried that no one would listen to me since I was no longer the president. But it seemed the bank was also concerned about the performance that had been declining since my departure. Therefore, I begged the bank to transfer some of their shares to me. The percentage of shares one holds can make a difference in the authority one has. If you own more than half the shares, you can normally decide on important matters such as dismissing directors and determining the compensation of executives. With this, it would be possible to pull Robert and Fred down from their positions as president and vice president. The discussion with the bank went smoothly in the direction I hoped for, and I managed to have them transfer part of their shares to me. Thus, combining the shares I originally held, I successfully acquired 51%. At this point, no one has more power than I do. I currently hold 51% of the shares. You understand what that means, don't you, President Owen and Vice President Fred? As I asked the two of them, their previous bravado was nowhere to be seen. They looked paler than I had ever seen them before. No, that can't be true. He was barely able to utter a word. You understand, right, Robert? As I asked Robert with a smile, he shook his shoulders significantly, his expression fearful. He must be desperately thinking about how to get out of this situation in his mind. But at this point, I have no intention of forgiving them. There had been chances for them to change their hearts before. I had met Fred at meetings several times, and each time I conveyed the current state of the amusement park and strongly appealed for improvements. But it was Fred who had long dismissed the words of an old man like me as irrelevant. Even if he now admits he was wrong and apologizes to me, I have no intention of forgiving him. Given his high pride, as he had always mocked me as an old man, he would never lower his head to me. While calmly thinking such things in my head, I ignored the two of them and walked up to the stage. Everyone, for the revival of the amusement park. I will expel the Owen family and implement reforms, I declared loudly, raising my voice. Though everyone was surprised when I suddenly took the stage. When I made my declaration, the whole venue erupted. Honestly, with the management deteriorating to this extent, no one is enjoying the benefits. No matter how hard they work, their salaries do not increase. On the contrary, I've heard employees say that even the amount of their annual bonuses continues to decrease. In such an environment, how can anyone feel motivated about their work? The only ones satisfied with the current situation are those like Fred, who can act however they like. Upon hearing my declaration, the employees looked at me with shining eyes. It seems that many employees felt hopeful that the work environment was about to change. The supportive atmosphere among the employees was comforting to me. Seeing the response from the staff, if the environment is changed to be more conducive to work, they will surely work harder than ever. Thankfully, including Nathan, there are a reasonable number of young employees who, if nurtured, could become pillars supporting the company in the future. Once the Owen family is expelled, I am confident that things will move in a better direction. A few days later, an extraordinary shareholders meeting was held to decide on the treatment of the Owen family. Of course, as the leading shareholder, I participated. At this meeting, I exposed all the terrible management practices of the Owen family without omission. Fred indulged in his power and acted capriciously, ignoring the words of those around him. He repeatedly threatened anyone who opposed him with his power. I also presented data showing how his insistence on his own ideas led to financial distress. I believe I was able to explain this clearly to the executives. I pursued Robert for betraying me, unjustly ousting me from the company, and for his failure to manage properly by appointing his incapable son as vice president. The Owen family, not wanting to give up their positions, desperately tried to rebut my statements, but their arguments were weak, and no one believed what they said. After exposing all their misdeeds to the shareholders and the executives, I, as the leading shareholder, demanded their dismissal. The motion passed, and the dismissal resolution was approved. With Robert's dismissal, the position of president would become vacant. There, a resolution for me to return as president was also passed on the spot, and I returned to the presidency. I wasn't particularly attached to the position of president. However, the current situation of the amusement park is perilously unstable. Immediate action was necessary, and that would be difficult for anyone who didn't deeply understand the amusement park. That's why I was chosen. Since returning as president, I have been very busy with the reconstruction of the amusement park. Amidst the business, I was informed by my subordinates about what happened to the Owen family after their dismissal. Both father and son, originally very prideful, had become unemployed. They seemed desperate to find new jobs, but it wasn't going well. Robert is older, and it would be difficult for him to find a job with conditions similar to before. As for Fred, although he is still at an age where he could turn things around, his problematic personality. He doesn't listen to others and always wants to be on top. So it's unlikely he could work under someone else at this point. Furthermore, I heard that Fred was seen wandering around the drinking district every day, drowning himself in alcohol. This situation must have hit him hard, driving him to escape into alcohol. For a moment, I felt pity for him. But remembering all the verbal abuse and atrocious behavior he had directed at me, I could only see it as karma. Besides, I don't have time to spare a thought for the Owen family now. In pursuing reforms for the amusement park, I decided to review the ridiculous attraction expansion plans that they had been planning. Looking through the plans for attractions themed on outer space or pirates, which completely ignored the world view of the amusement park, I couldn't help but sigh. Our amusement park is prominently touted as a retro park. Yet why do they keep making plans that are so out of sync with the concept? The first thing I started was revising this unplanned and chaotic attraction expansion. Even if we add more attractions, if they're all out of sync with the concept, we can't satisfy the people who seek a retro experience. Believing that the revival of the amusement park would require a significant period, I made the bold decision to close the park for 6 months. While the park is closed, we won't generate revenue since we can't admit customers. However, We can use this limited time to create an amusement park that will attract many visitors again. Lend me your strength, Nathan. Leave it to me, Grandpa. In seeking assistance for the revival of the amusement park, not only did I turn to the bank, our financier, but my grandson Nathan was also one of those I asked for help. The exterior will be restored to its former retro style, while incorporating new elements to keep our longtime customers from getting bored. That's when I thought of using modern technologies, including VR. I lack knowledge in modern technologies. In contrast, my grandson Nathan has specialized knowledge in it from university and is very knowledgeable. I will lead the design efforts. I will leave the technical aspects to Nathan. Nathan and I, as the main figures, along with all the employees, work together to rebuild the amusement park. Previously, under Fred's control, there were only disinterested people. But now, freed from that, everyone has regained their motivation. Everyone actively shares ideas, and we incorporate good ones into our creations. Nothing was useful when talking to Fred, but it's different now. The current environment, where good ideas are adopted, seems to have inspired many employees. An amusement park is a place of dreams. I want those who work here to enjoy their jobs. Taking advice from the bank, the amusement park we all built together, although I say it myself, turned out very well. The appearance, fitting for the retro concept, stands out. Inside, we've sprinkled elements of the old era, creating an atmosphere where adults can reminisce about the old days. The attractions incorporating its technology, spearheaded by Nathan, are refreshing to experience and likely to be addictive for many. The 6-month period was busy and flew by in a blink. Looking back on the days spent fully committed to reforming the amusement park, it feels like it was a more substantial period than just 6 months. Right now, in front of me is the culmination of our efforts, created together by everyone. I felt deeply moved, and tears nearly came to my eyes. Grandpa, are you about to cry? The reopening is tomorrow. Save the tears for when you see the customers smiling. Right, yeah. I shouldn't cry in front of my grandson. I calmed myself and held back the tears. On the day of the reopening, we distributed flyers in the neighborhood and ran commercials within a limited area, which brought in many visitors. Many people were smiling at the amusement park. This was exactly the sight I wanted to see. As I walked around the park, paying attention to the customers' reactions, the expressions of those enjoying the attractions were much better than before the renewal. With this, the dwindling visitor numbers should gradually increase. Feeling the effectiveness of the renewal, I resolved to continue managing the park in a way that keeps entertaining our customers. Perhaps the ordeal with the Owen family made me feel this more profoundly than ever. It took over a decade to reach this point, but having seen the sight I wanted to see once more, I savored the fulfilling sense of contentment.
Patty, I've always been telling you, haven't I? I wanted a son to carry on our family name. yet you gave birth to a girl. I don't need someone who's useless like you. Sign the divorce papers and get out of the house with your daughter."
One day, out of the blue, this was what Tony blurted out at my in-laws' house. In his right hand was the divorce paper, and he was holding his mistress on his left side. As I was dumbfounded by his unbelievable claim, his mistress added seriously, "Hello, I'm Kristen. I'm carrying Tony's baby, and of course, the baby's a boy. We've already confirmed the gender with tests, so I'll be the one to make Tony happy. Please, don't interfere with us anymore. Got it?" It was as if I was being painted as the villain. Then my mother-in-law, Laura, delivered the final blow. "I was completely deceived by you, Patty. I feel sorry for Tony, so never show your face to us again." There was not a single reasonable person around here. I couldn't understand how they could say such heartless words like that. While glancing at the entrance, I was utterly shocked, but I wasn't surprised or panicked about the situation. "What are you all even talking about? I have been single for a week now. I'm no longer your wife, Tony, so do as you please. Sarah and I will leave."
"Patty, have you lost your mind? When did we get divorced? The divorce is supposed to happen right now."
"You're the one who lost your mind, Dad. We've already moved to a new house, so bye."
"What are you talking about, Sarah? You guys are really stupid."
My husband laughed loudly enough for it to be heard outside as he pointed at us. He may be laughing now, but that won't last long. He has no clue on what's about to happen. I will never forgive my husband. He will surely regret hurting our daughter. As my husband continued to laugh, I calmly began to speak. "The stupid one here is you, Tony. I already filed the divorce papers. You just had no clue about it."
Being pushed to the edge really does make people do unexpected things, huh? I never thought you would espouse such nonsense, but I guess this is your true nature. I feel way better knowing I'm divorcing a liar like you.
My husband, along with Laura and Kristen, looked down on me with contempt. "Really, why did I ever approve of such a foolish daughter-in-law like you? I really want to punch my past self. I wasted my precious son's time. The biggest sin of my life. The only comfort is that you're about to be discarded right now. So just get out, loser." "Oh, Laura, you and Tony are too kind. How could you just listen to her? I definitely made the right choice in choosing Tony. He's such a compassionate man. Patty, stop lying and let Tony go. It's for your own good." Their smirks were exactly like those evil witches in fairy tales. The heart is revealed through actions, and the ability to upset people with just a laugh is, in a way, a talent. But where there is evil, there is also justice. From now on, I will be the one to judge this evil. They will all regret what they've done. I displayed a video on my smartphone and confronted the three. "Do you recognize this?"
A video? No. Footage from a camera? What about it?"
"Oh, isn't this Tony's room?" "Why do you have footage of Tony's room on your smartphone?" Do they really not understand anything? For people who call others stupid, their brains don't seem to be very sharp. That's exactly why they engage in immoral acts like infidelity so easily and even condone it. At the moment, it all made sense to me. I decided to reveal the truth to the three of them. "This is footage from a hidden camera. I have been secretly monitoring you, Tony. I installed a camera in your room. So with that, I found out about your mistress and the pre-filled divorce papers."
"What? You installed a hidden camera in my room?"
"That's why I secretly took out the divorce papers while you were away and submitted them. If you think I'm lying, why don't you go check it? There's nothing left in that drawer." Tony returned from his room half in disbelief, but when he came back, his face was pale. He seemed to have recognized the truth of my words. Laura and Kristen also lost their smiles when they saw his state. "I can't believe it. She already knew."
Well, I'm surprised, but this is convenient, isn't it? It saved me the trouble of submitting them. Kristen, let's remarry right now. Nothing can stop us now.
That's right. When you think about it, there's nothing bad about this. It just sped up the process of getting rid of a useless daughter-in-law like her. This woman couldn't get pregnant with a son anyway. She was never right for my precious Tony. This is a chance for Tony to restart his life. Laura laughed loudly. As a mother myself, I understand the feelings of a parent who loves their child, but even then, the love she has for her son seems a bit too much. Certainly, my husband had taken over the family business after his father passed away, and he probably earned more than the average person. I knew he had worked hard. After all, we were married. But no matter how adorable a parent finds their outstanding child, it doesn't justify mistreating their spouse. The harsh words thrown at me by Laura from the time we were married are a bitter memory I wish I could forget. It has been truly difficult. My only ally is my daughter, Sarah. She has even been ignored and mistreated by them. I can never forgive them. Only I can protect my daughter. I will make them pay for how they treated us. I pulled out a small piece of paper from the drawer and presented it to the three. Tony and his mother looked at the paper with puzzled expressions.
What is this scrap of paper? A business card?
Hanson Corporation's CEO, Robert Gale? Isn't Hanson Corporation a major client of your company, Tony?
Yeah. Why do you have the business card of the CEO of such a big company? You shouldn't have any chance to interact with a CEO like him.
The two of them spoke as they pleased. Do they think I'm some kind of punching bag? Unfortunately, I'm human and sharp words do hurt. But they seem unaware of this. While that was happening, Kristen looked pale. Noticing her turning pale, Tony spoke up.
Kristen, what's wrong? You look pale.
Of course she would. Wouldn't you be shocked if someone suddenly pulled out your own father's business card?
Huh? Father? What are you talking about?
Seeing my husband's visibly confused expression, I couldn't help but smile. He really knew nothing. Seizing the moment, I raised my voice and stated clearly, Your mistress is the daughter of your client's CEO.
What? No way. Such a perfect coincidence like that can't be true. You must have gone crazy.
I always thought you were a worthless daughter-in-law, but now you're just a jerk trying to frame people. I wonder what kind of upbringing produces such a worthless person like you. I'd really like to ask your parents about this. I was infuriated by what Laura said, which not only insulted me, but my parents as well. She really insults people as easily as breathing. My daughter puffed up her cheeks in indignation as well. Seeing her like that relaxed me a bit. Emboldened by the comments of Tony and his mother, Kristen confronted me with a defiant expression. I agree with Tony and Laura. I don't care if he's the CEO of a big company or whatever. I've never met or heard of such a person. Don't make up someone's family out of nowhere, you jerk.
Exactly. I have met Mr. Gale because of my position, but he looked nothing like Kristen. Though I admit judging Kristen as a CEO's daughter makes sense, since she is elegant and intelligent. She's totally on a different level than you.
Right. She must have been raised by wonderful parents unlike you. That also means Sarah's future is predictable, even though she's Tony's daughter with a mother like you. Laura glaringly sent a contemptuous look towards my daughter. Not to be outdone, my daughter glared back fiercely. Enraged, I slammed the papers I had prepared hard onto the table.
What now? Robert Gale? Christian Gale? Adopted?
This is Mr. Gale's family registry. It proves the identities of Mr. Gale, his wife, and their unmarried child. As written here, Kristen is Mr. Gale's adopted daughter, which is why she doesn't resemble him.
What? Why do you have Mr. Gale's family registry?
Because Mr. Gale and I have a cooperative relationship. After I learned of your affair, I tried to reach out to him. Mr. Gale kindly entrusted me with this family registry. Tony then raised his voice.
What a joke. He's the CEO of a big company. You can't just meet him that easily. That family registry must be fake.
Now you've even resorted to faking documents. What a hopeless woman. Did you think we were so dumb as to be deceived by fake documents like this? You're gravely mistaken. Don't lump us in with someone as dumb as you. The stupid ones here are you guys. Faking official documents is a crime called forgery of official documents, punishable by 1 to 10 years in prison. I wouldn't commit such a crime just for this. If I got arrested, Sarah would suffer.
Then why are these documents here? You must have prepared these to confuse us.
He seemed desperate to deny any relationship between Mr. Gale and Kristen. Clearly, the idea of his mistress being the daughter of a client's CEO was unthinkable. People tend to shut out information that's inconvenient to them. But that's fine. Whether they face it or not, they're doomed for life. If you think they're fake, that's fine. I'm just letting you know the facts. My firm stance began to change my husband and Laura's attitude. Their smiles vanished and they began to tremble. Tony turned back to Kristen.
Kristen, just to make sure, tell me. You weren't deceiving me, right?
Kristen shook her head vigorously. That's impossible. Why would I lie to the person I love? Mr. Gale is a stranger to me. I had a child with you because I love you. I would never lie about this. I couldn't help but give a grand round of applause to Kristen's response. Well done, Kristen. You've shown your unwavering will. You truly love Tony, don't you? I'm moved. So I have a reward for you. Just wait a moment. I hurried out of the living room with puzzled looks stabbing my back. Giving no care to that, I stepped outside and quickly returned with the reward. Sorry for the wait. Here's your reward. What? No way! Kristen's eyes widened in shock as she backed away. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Gale had been waiting outside all along. Furthermore, the door was intentionally left ajar. When Tony presented me with the divorce papers today, I glanced at the entrance with dismay, aware of Mr. Gale's presence. Tony straightened up immediately and greeted as soon as he saw Mr. Gale.
Oh, Mr. Gale, it's been a while. Don't worry about formalities. They mean nothing to me.
Mr. Gale returned Tony's greeting with a cold gaze. A deep wrinkle formed between his eyebrows and his veins popped out.
I've been waiting outside the door, and oh, what an interesting conversation I've heard. Tony, I've come to understand your true nature very well. It's been an enlightening experience. To think that there are people who speak such foul words in this world. Don't you think so? Well, you see...
Knowing that Mr. Gale had heard everything, Tony seemed unable to come up with any excuses. He just stood there, dripping with cold sweat and looking down. Mr. Gale also glanced at Kristen, whose shoulders jolted up. Don't you two feel ashamed of what you've done? There are things one shouldn't do as a human. Marriage and love are different. Once you've sworn eternal love, you must at least fulfill the basic responsibilities. Apologize to Patty immediately. His angry voice filled the room. Tony and Kristen shrank back, but Laura stood her ground defiantly. If eternal love is so important, then Tony and Kristen are deeply in love too. Patty no longer loves Tony. After all, she was the one who filed for divorce. Therefore, it is only natural for two people in love to be together. There is nothing wrong with that.
That is an unbearable justification. Yes, it is joyful when two people in love come together. However, both parties being single is the basic condition. Moreover, there's not only Patty, but also Sarah involved. Disposing of someone because they can't have a son? What era do you think you're living in? If you are living in the present, please update your mindset. This is just unacceptable. At Mr. Gale's anger, Laura ran out of words to respond. The room fell silent. There was a reason for his anger. In fact, Mr. Gale's wife was infertile and unable to have children. There are still people with outdated mindsets like Tony and Laura, but there are also many who want to have children but can't.
Pregnancy and childbirth are sacred, and we mustn't forget that. Mr. Gale could not tolerate his family hurting others for selfish reasons like wanting a son for heir. Tony and Laura were silenced by Mr. Gale, but Kristen's eyes burned with anger. She started to argue back to Mr. Gale directly. You preach as if you're some kind of saint, but you're selfish too. You adopted me because you couldn't have your own kids, right? Whether it was good for me didn't matter. That was just adults making decisions for their own convenience. Kristen clenched her fists and yelled with all her might. I don't know the details, but Mr. Gale is a strict man who apparently didn't spoil Kristen with money or material things. This may be why Kristen feels unloved by her father, as they aren't blood related. Tony and Laura seemed confused as the divorce turmoil had suddenly turned into an argument between Mr. Gale and Kristen. They looked at each other uneasily. Kristen, unable to control her emotions, continued to lash out at Mr. Gale. You just adopted me for Mom's sake, right? Because she wanted a child? Because she was important to you? I was only being used to satisfy someone else. I'm just a tool to you. Everyone thinks they can just use me. Although I haven't known Mr. Gale long, he seems like a genuinely good person. Even as an outsider, I think Kristen is wrong, but Mr. Gale quietly listened to her. What? Aren't you going to say anything? Or do you think what I'm saying isn't even worth responding to?
That's not it. It's not that. I'm actually happy.
Happy? Are you crazy? Or is that some kind of weird hobby?
It's the first time you've spoken honestly to me. You've always been a well-behaved child who didn't need much attention. I used to think you were just a quiet kid, but now I see that's not the case. You must have endured a lot on your own.
His eyes softened as he spoke. Kristen's shoulders trembled slightly.
Yes, I have been strict with you, that's true. I won't make excuses. But it was because I love you. They say the opposite of love is indifference, right? I wouldn't bother saying anything if I didn't care.
Stop it! I can't believe you're saying this now. I've never been loved by my family. Enough, Kristen. You don't understand anything. Even as an outsider, I can see that Mr. Gale cares about you. Yet you just deny it one-sidedly. Right now, you just look like a child throwing a tantrum. I couldn't help but intervene. As a parent myself, I couldn't stand to listen any longer. Being a parent is harder than most can imagine. You can't just quit midway. There's no guarantee of a return for all the effort you pour into your children. Sometimes what you do for their sake can backfire. Even after lovingly raising them, in the end, you have to let go. It's a tough job, isn't it? But the reason parents can keep going is solely the love and responsibility they feel for their children. It's clear that Mr. Gale has more than enough of both. But Kristen seems too stubborn to see the truth right now. Don't lecture me when you were just dumped by your husband. You're just clinging to him because you can't do anything else. Everything has been taken away from you, and you're just going to keep falling into misery. The conversation shifted towards me, and seeing that it was their chance, Tony and Laura regained their momentum.
That's right. I don't know much about Kristen's past, but what's certain is that she'll be happy from now on because she's remarrying me.
Yes, Tony is a wonderful man. He was too good for someone like you. Now he can finally start a life with a woman who matches him. I'm looking forward to it. A child's happiness is a parent's happiness. What they were saying wasn't wrong, but coming from Laura, it sounded insincere. My daughter seemed to think the same, giving her grandmother a cold look. Despite the three showing no signs of remorse, I boldly declared to them, I don't mind. Remarry or do whatever you like, but remember, you'll be the ones regretting it. That's for certain. My husband and his mother swallowed nervously, but still arrogantly took Kristen's hand.
You're complaining it's so lame. Just keep on talking, loser.
Don't bother contacting us anymore. We four, including Tony and Kristen's baby, will live happily together. Goodbye, Dad. I don't think we'll see each other again. Don't expect to see your grandson. With those final words, the three left the house. After the storm had passed, a silence remained. Mr. Gale was the first to speak.
Patty, Sarah, I'm truly sorry for the rude things my daughter has said.
Please don't apologize. This isn't your fault, Mr. Gale, and it's okay.
What do you mean by it's okay?
Mr. Gale looked puzzled, but I gave him a meaningful smile. There are facts that none of you know yet. They should come to light soon enough. At my words, both Mr. Gale and Sarah could only tilt their heads in confusion. A few days later, I was waiting for a call from my husband at a certain place. It's one of the most luxurious apartments in LA. I quite like the view. It's outstanding. Even if the wait gets long, I doubt I'll get bored. While I was drinking my second cup of coffee, the long-awaited call finally came. I answered with an exceptionally cheerful voice, and then heard my husband's very flustered voice. What's the matter? Calling all of a sudden like this? It's only been a few days since you cut ties with me.
Help me, Patty. Kristen has gone missing.
Oh, really? That sounds serious. But if that's the case, shouldn't you report it to the police? I'm not in the business of finding people, you know.
No, Patty, it's not just that she's gone missing. My ATM cards and credit cards have disappeared too. She had asked me about the pins before, saying we should share important information in case of emergencies. And now my money is being withdrawn like crazy. I don't know what to do.
My husband's words were all over the place, and I just had to laugh. Meanwhile, he continued to rant about something dumb. He seemed utterly clueless and confused. After a good laugh, I finally decided to tell him the truth. You know, Kristen has another man, not just you. She actually has a real boyfriend.
What are you talking about all of a sudden? I'm already so upset. Don't confuse me more.
It's true, and if you want to know, the baby in Kristen's belly isn't yours either.
That's a lie. It has to be. You just have a bad personality, giving me wrong information and looking down, laughing at me like that. You're the worst. I've lost all respect for you.
My husband was so upset he started crying. So I guess Tony and Kristen's romance didn't last long. Is his mother worried? Of course, for me, everything's going according to plan. I'll show you proof that what I'm saying is true. Here's a question for you. Where am I right now?
How should I know? Just go to hell.
Wow, that hurt. But the one who's really going to hell isn't me, it's you. Anyway, the correct answer is right here. I switched to a video call to show my surroundings. Immediately, I could hear my husband scream from the smartphone.
Kristen, why are you with Patty? You two were conspiring against me?
Kristen remained silent, looking down. That's understandable. After all, I now have leverage of her. Tony's not just Kristen here. Let me introduce you to Alex, Kristen's real boyfriend. As I introduced him, Alex appeared on the screen. Yes, I had already made contact with Kristen's actual boyfriend. We had just stormed into Kristen's house together. A louder scream came from the other end.
You bastard. How dare you seduce my Kristen? You have my ATM cards and credit cards, don't you? Give them back now, along with the money you stole. I must say, I didn't know anything about this. Not about your existence, nor the ATM cards or credit cards. I like an explanation about this situation too. Kristen?
Alex glared sharply at Kristen as she kept on looking down.
Kristen? What is going on? Who is this man? Your real boyfriend? That's a lie, right? We loved each other so much. Tell me the truth.
Shut up.
What? I can't hear you.
I said shut up. You delusional jerk. What do you mean we loved each other? I never loved you, not even once. It was all in your head. I was only with you for the money, and you easily cheated on me when you had a wife, you jerk.
My husband was so shocked he could hardly close his mouth. After a long silence, he suddenly slumped over the table and started crying. He continued to cry out like a child, unable to have a proper conversation. Meanwhile, Alex was grilling Kristen, and she fired back in a hostile way, making things worse. I felt the urge to go home and relax over coffee with Sarah, but I couldn't just abandon the job halfway. Since there was no more need for me to say, I quietly left my seat and moved to the hallway. All that was left was to patiently wait for my husband to recover. After he had cried enough, Tony finally raised his swollen face. Just when I thought we could wrap things up, he made a surprising suggestion.
Let's start over, Patty. We can still go back to how we were.
What? What are you talking about?
Taking care of Sarah alone must be financially difficult for you, right? Besides, isn't it better for the family to be together? Mom will surely understand.
How conveniently he speaks of family now. A word that should be warm and loving has turned vile because of him. I laughed at him with all the scorn I could muster. No, I'll pass. Do you have any idea how much you've made me suffer? And it's not just about me. What angers me most is that you hurt Sarah. I never thought you would neglect your own daughter after an affair.
I just really wanted a son. There was no other intention, and it's not too late. If we love each other again, a son will come soon.
Please stop saying such disgusting things. There's not an ounce of love left for you and me. I can't even stand to breathe the same air as you, let alone touch you. And you keep talking about a son. But isn't that completely unnecessary now?
What do you mean?
Your misconduct is already well known among our company and business partners. It's being viewed as a problem everywhere, so it's only a matter of time before our existing deals are canceled. Soon you'll struggle with cash flow and the business will become unmanageable. If the company falls apart, what's the use of an heir?
That's...
After that, my husband was silent and seemed stunned. I finished with all the sarcasm I could muster. The only family you have left is your mother. Make sure to get along with her. I pressed the end call button and left Kristen's house. That was the last time I saw my husband. The clear blue sky seemed even more beautiful today. After that, my husband was shunned by everyone from his company and business partners. As expected, the company faced financial difficulties and quickly decided to fold. Tony and Laura's once strong bond took a hit when they started struggling with money, and now they're stuck in a cycle of arguing. The industry spread rumors about my husband, and he has no prospects for re-employment. Laura has never worked a part-time job, so she can hardly start working now, and does nothing but complain at home. My husband manages to get by on day labor, but his standard of living continues to decline. Both he and his relationship with his mother got worse, and it seems they will lead a difficult life forever. For those who saw their child as a mere tool, this was a fitting end. Meanwhile, Kristen did give birth safely, but eventually broke up with Alex, her real boyfriend. Perhaps Alex was a decent man. If suddenly you find out your girlfriend was cheating and stole from another, it's normal to want to avoid getting involved in that mess. While he's someone I don't really know, I do hope he finds happiness. After breaking up with Alex, Kristen, who has never worked properly, has no choice but to rely on her father, Robert. But being a strict man, both to himself and others, Robert did not coddle her, but rather pushed her away. Of course, this isn't to say he abandoned her. Robert loves Kristen, which is why he wants her to acknowledge her mistakes, reflect, and live an honest life. I am indebted to Robert as well. I can only hope that some of his wishes reach her. As for me, I now live peacefully with my daughter. While we aren't rich, living without fear of living with toxic family members is truly comfortable. I want to give my daughter all the attention she missed out on. Years later, I was lucky enough to get remarried with my current husband and was blessed with a son. Looking at our son, I am reminded that there are people who can't have kids, despite their desires, and that pregnancy and childbirth are sacred things. These are things I must never forget. Going forward, I would cherish the miracle of my children's birth and vow to find happiness with my new family.